Well, I'm very glad to be here, and the purpose of being here is to demo our app and to get your feedback. I'm going to just show a few slides to explain to you why we built the app and what the strategy is. And the first is the one that's obvious. Is it not? It's not on?
Actually, it won't be amplifying. That's for the video.
Oh,
so if you could
okay.
Just speak a little louder.
Sure.
Last row. Thank you.
So the first is something that we all know, that earthquakes are a growing threat in the world because the world's population is flowing into megacities. Many of these megacities lie astride the plate boundaries, and we are headed for the possibility of great losses. And perhaps this can stand in for the world as a whole when you see that India has been in a 40 million year long collision with Asia, and that along the leading edge of India is the Himalaya foothill thrust system, which has been the site of magnitude 8 to 9 earthquakes over the last 15 centuries. Virtually no earthquake of any real size in several generations, so the import of this threat is largely lost. Even the Nepal earthquake, even the Pakistan earthquakes are small compared to what has historically occurred. There are 600 million people living in the Ganges Plain. And if any of these earthquakes, if this were to recur in our lifetime, we could be witnessing the world's first million-death earthquake. And as we look over the last 25 or so years, the evidence suggests that the total toll of earthquakes is rising. Now, in the underdeveloped world, the cost of earthquakes is largely lives and the structure of society. In the developed world, it's largely a financial issue in terms of financial losses. And what's striking is that the rate of uninsured losses is rising very, very rapidly. So it would appear that the world is not preparing itself for this. And this becomes even more evident when we compare several of the natural hazards, and we can see in these red bars for earthquakes that the vertical axis is the percent of uninsured losses. So most of the losses that we are projected to experience are not covered in any way. Now, why would that be so in a country like ours? In fact, why would it be so in a state like ours, where certainly we are aware that earthquakes have occurred historically and will occur again? It's the judgment of Volkan Sevilgan, the Chief Technology Officer of Temblor, and myself, is that there are really 3 reasons. One, the failure of scientists like me. We can't predict earthquakes, so we can never tell you with any certainty it's coming. And what we prepare for are things that we really know are coming. The second is that memory fades. It's been a long time since the Loma Prieta earthquake in Northern California and since the Northridge earthquake in Southern California. And with every passing year, the rate of insurance has dropped since those events. And the third is probably the most insidious, that the protections that we make for earthquakes are invisible to our neighbors. And it turns out that really matters. I'm a homeowner, and when I walk down my street and I see that the neighbors who I respect have put solar cells on their roofs, what does that do? It tells me that solar really makes sense, right? I'm doing good for the world, and I'm going to be saving some money. Now compare that if I walk down the street and that neighbor has retrofitted his house. It's invisible. I don't see it. There's no peer pressure. There's no recognition. And this is does he have insurance? Again, that's invisible. So the kind of things that motivate us, are they driving a Prius? Oh, maybe I should drive a Prius. Those things aren't at play. And when we interview homeowners and say, well, what's your thinking about this? Why have you not retrofitted your home or gotten insurance or secured your contents? These are the things that we hear from people, and you've probably heard them too. There's a long list here, but I think probably most of these will ring true. And these are virtually myths. None of these are correct. And it's very important that we find some way of talking to people without scaring them that these ideas aren't correct. And if you want evidence that we are in kind of a quake denial. No better place to look than a bar. So I challenge you to find any bar that does any better than this in protecting its patrons and its bartenders from flying broken glass during an earthquake. We all know what's going to happen to this bar in an earthquake. And do these people really have anything to worry about? Well, they're a mile from the San Andreas Fault. So here's your homework assignment this afternoon. Go find a bar that protects the liquor bottles. It's a tough job. And here's what's interesting. I can barely find any bar in the entire Bay Area that does this. But when I go to Japan, I can't find a bar that doesn't do this. And it's not by law. It's that people in Japan are more aware of earthquakes and more aware that you can easily protect yourself from it. Okay, so I'm a field geologist. There's my field evidence. It's indisputable. We're not preparing. And this is why we've created Temblor. And so now I'd like to show it to you. Okay, and if you want to, you can pull out your phone and do this with me, because it's a mobile app. And what you do is if you're on an iPhone, you'd use Safari, and if you're on an Android, you'd use Chrome, and you just put in temblor.net. We are not in Google Play or the App Store yet, so we're what's called a mobile-friendly web app. So temblor.net, and you'll see this screen. And then you just click here where it says click to use Temblor for free. And by the way, you see here that what we're saying is we're using the best publicly available data and methods. And that takes you to the download page, and you just put your address in, your email address. And what you're doing here is accepting the terms of the use, and the terms of use are that it's free for non-commercial use. It's free, it's ad-free. And once you do that, it finds your location and it's going to put you in a map. And if you're using it on a phone, you'll just see that the screen is more narrow, but you're getting identically what I'm getting. So you're seeing that we're right next to the fault, you all know that, and you're seeing the month of earthquakes on the Hayward Fault, the San Andreas, the Calaveras Fault, the Grenville Fault. All of the faults are lighting up in earthquakes. Because I'm a geologist, I like to see a terrain background. And you can see underneath it here, we have a seismic hazard rank. Oops. So the seismic hazard rank is our attempt to provide an intuitive measure of your location's hazard. So it goes from 0 to 100, and here in Berkeley, you can see it's 80. If I move the pin over to Larkspur, it's going to drop down to 49. If I move to San Francisco, it's going to pop up to 59. If I go to San Leandro, it's going to go to 89. If I go farther in the south, I'm at 93 now. It gets uglier and uglier. And so now in East San Jose, I'm at 96, and here is where we had a swarm of earthquakes last night. We can zoom in on that swarm, and we can see that swarm is occurring in an area that has a hazard rank of about 98. So where you go matters. And one of the most common myths that we hear from homeowners is, oh, you know, it doesn't matter where you are in the Bay Area, you could get hit by an earthquake. And in a sense, that's an unfortunate byproduct of the way the USGS talks about hazard as being, okay, an earthquake could occur somewhere. In fact, earthquakes are much more likely to occur in certain places than others, and the reason why the numbers are so high in the South Bay is the faults converge. We have the Hayward and Calaveras and San Andreas faults all close to each other. Now, another thing that you can do is go up to this menu in the upper right-hand corner and turn on liquefaction. And so now we can see something else of importance, that some of these areas are highly liquefiable. So here, for example, we're in a fan, an alluvial fan north of Fremont. And we can go to, for example, the Oakland Airport or the San Francisco Airport and see that they are in engineered fill. Or we can go to San Francisco and zoom in, and we can see that we're on fill here. These are the graveyards of gold rush ships. So one can become aware of these kind of problems. Zooming out, we can switch that from liquefaction, let's go to landslides. So if you live in the Berkeley Hills, then being on a landslide could be a very important consideration in buying a home or in renting an apartment. If you bought a home here after the earthquake, you might still have the home, but you'd have a new address. So the goal is to make it as easy as possible for people to see issues that affect their hazard. Now, let me go to another one, in another location in Pacifica. Okay, and I'm going to zoom in here. And just for fun, I'm going to put a satellite map underneath it so we can actually see individual homes. So here's a home on a landslide in the San Andreas Fault Zone. And I'm going to this home because we met a real estate agent. We're talking to all the people who are part of this earthquake world. And Mike Herner had just sold this home. And we said, well, were there any issues with the sale of this home, given that it's in a fault zone on a landslide? And he said, yeah, fog. And we said, did buyers have any hesitancy to make bids on this home? He said, we had 8 offers over asking. It sold for $125,000 over the asking price. This is crazy. This should be a park. There shouldn't be any houses here at all. And yet it's being roundly ignored. And this real estate agent's attitude was, oh, it doesn't matter where you go. In fact, he said, the shaking is lowest on the fault zone. So that's what a homeowner is hearing, where a homeowner is hearing nothing. And that's an indication that you can't depend on your real estate agent to tell you, to help you make a good decision. You've got to have the information because they're really not on your side. So let's take a further look. Let's go back. Let's zoom out and take a home here. I'll turn landslides off. Okay, so I've got a home in Berkeley now, and now I'm going to slide down. And you can see that we've asked of you a few questions about the home. So let's say this home were 3,000 square feet. And we are saying that it was built before 1975, and we hit submit. And what we show you is the chances of damage anytime during the next 30 years. We could have chosen a different time period, but this is the length of a mortgage. Okay, so in this pie chart, you can see, okay, during the next 30 years, there's a 60% chance of no damage at all. That can't be crazy because we've just had 30 years where we've lived and there's been no damage at all. But on the other end of the spectrum, there's about 1 in 15 chance of nearly $600,000 of damage. And a person can begin to see what the costs are of owning this home in terms of the likelihood of damage. We also show them, okay, for an earthquake insurance policy with a 15% deductible, what's the chance of receiving some kind of payout? And a person sees that. And then we try to create context. We say, look, homeowners are required to have fire insurance. We all have car insurance. Many people have liability insurance. And it's not just a matter of insurance. You do things to make your driving safer. You know, you wear a seatbelt, you try not to text, things like that. But you can see that the chance of $600,000 of damage is actually higher than any of these others. It's about 4 times higher than the chance the house would burn down, which is why it's about 4 times more expensive to buy that insurance. So let's say the person decides to retrofit. So we say year built or retrofit, so we do after 1976. And now the chances of $600,000 of damage went from 1 in 15 to 1 in 29. And now you can see that this red bar has moved way down the chart. It's now kind of in the middle of the things you protect yourself from, not the highest. And if we hadn't done that, then we show them this calculation. We say if you were to retrofit, you'd be 3 times safer in terms of the reduction of injuries. And we calculate or we estimate the cost of their retrofit, $8,500, and the benefit, $2,250, and we subtract one from the other and say, here's the net financial benefit of retrofitting. And the reason why we're doing that is, here's what we hear from retrofitters. A guy went over to bid on a job, and in many of these cases, this was in San Francisco, you get access to the bolt down through the garage. And he said to the owner said, how much? He said $10,000. And the owner leaned on his brand new Porsche and said, $10,000, that's ridiculous. And that's what he pays to tune his car. So what's the problem here? The owner doesn't have any understanding of what's the benefit of this financially. I need to know that before I can figure out if the cost is worthwhile. And that's what we're trying to provide here. Now let me go to one other location. I'll make it very personal. This is my mom's condominium in Santa Monica. Okay, look at this. I let my mom buy a condo on the fall. I'm an idiot. How could I do that? This was 12 years ago. What, Nick?
She didn't ask you, did she?
She shouldn't have had to ask me. I'm a bad son. So it was hard to come by this information 12 years ago. And now the idea is you've always got it on your phone. It should be really, really easy to know if you're placing yourself in harm's way. And the same is true for liquefaction potential in the area. And by the way, with our summer intern last summer, we were driving from LAX to Pasadena. And this is the Newport Inglewood fault here. And you can see the fault is offset. And it's right lateral, which means this side is going this way, and this side is going this way. So if you have what's called a left jog on a right lateral fault, the rock gets squeezed in those places. So it creates a little hill. So we were driving across while looking at Temblor, and I said, Allie, you know what? We're coming to this jog. It should be a hill. And then the taxi goes right over the hill. And that was so great. Think about how useful this is for a field trip, rather than dealing with a paper map to find the fault. With Temblor, your lousy commute should be a fun geo field trip, especially if you live here and you're basically commuting on a fault the whole time. Okay, so you've gotten a tour of the app and what it does. We also have a blog because it's very important to us to talk about earthquakes to people and to kind of create a community where we have the ability to think about what we're seeing. So this is one that we posted yesterday about the magnitude 4.2 and 4.1 earthquake that occurred in Oklahoma. So you may not know, but Oklahoma dethroned California as the most seismically active state in the lower 48 18 months ago. And Kansas has also beat California, so things are really changing. And it's kind of incredible that even with the drop in the price of oil, they're still drilling, they're still re-injecting, these earthquakes are still going on. And so, for example, in this, make that a little bigger. This is newly released yesterday, a analysis by the USGS of the hazard. You can compare California to Oklahoma. And you can see how Oklahoma is more blood red than California today. It's just a matter of time before Oklahoma has a large earthquake. And so this is a problem waiting to happen. So here's another article of ours on liquefaction, which, as you've seen, is a problem. We have an article on earthquake emergency kits. And this is that my wife and my brother-in-law, we gave all of our grown children earthquake emergency kits for Hanukkah. Because the idea was to transform a source of anxiety into a sign of love. You know, we should be making this a positive thing. We should be coming together over this and not just pretending that it doesn't exist. The last thing I want to show you is a work in progress, which is, again, trying to talk to the home buyer, because that's really the time when you can do yourself a big favor and not buy the home on a landslide or a liquefaction zone or straddling the Hayward Fault. And yet your real estate agent isn't helping. So this is called a Chrome extension. So you drop this little 100 kilobyte file into Chrome, and then every house you hit in Zillow or Redfin or Realtor or a rental site called Zumper, you will see Temblor results. And Temblor is reading the information inside Zillow about the home, its square footage, and its age of construction to make its calculation. And so then a home buyer has this chance of buying with their eyes open. This is Zumper, which is a rental site, and it's also here, but now for Zumper we're only using a 5-year window rather than a 30-year window because people don't rent for that long. And we're not talking about the cost of damage, we're talking about the likelihood of damage, because if your apartment is extensively damaged, you can't occupy it. Maybe you can't even get your things out of it. So that's, in our judgment, what a renter might want. So I want to leave you with the idea that we want to inspire people to become aware of their hazards and to do something about it. We don't want to scare people, we don't want to sue them, and we don't want to snow them. Temblor's mission is to make the information produced here at Peer and at other leading research institutions digestible, understandable, and actionable to the public. And if we can do that, we can perhaps overcome some of these myths, some of these obstacles to truly being prepared for earthquakes. Thank you.
Very interesting, and have plenty of time for discussion and questions, comments. Come this way.
Yes.
I have a question. What area is covered by Temblor?
So that's a great question. So we cover the entire lower 48 states. However, we haven't yet, the USGS released on Monday the new hazard maps for the oil patch for Oklahoma and Texas and Kansas. So while we have those areas, we're not handling their true hazard correct yet. So you can see our hazard rank is way too low for an area that has many more earthquakes than California, but we do have the faults and the earthquakes in them. We can go to Salt Lake City, Utah, where we have everything, or Seattle. So it's our goal to be complete throughout the United States. We're gathering up all of the liquefaction landslide data and faulting data from throughout the United States. You had a question?
How reliable
The data?
Yeah.
That's another great question. So we're using the USGS hazard curves. The USGS publishes on like a 4x4 kilometer grid curves that describe the likelihood of shaking as a function of time. And then we use fragility curves, which provide an indication of the amount of damage to a structure as a function of the shaking that come from HAZUS. And then we're using the pier method to add to that the effect of being in a sedimentary basin, which amplifies the shaking, to get our results. So what that means for hazard is we're not considering the worst case earthquake for your fault, let's say here the Seattle fault. We're considering all earthquakes large and small, near and far, so it's a probabilistic estimate. And we're taking average building resilience for the kind of structures that people live in. So our hope would be that on average, if we played this tape out for 1,000 years, we would get reliable results. Dick?
Ross, I'd like to engage you in a conversation about insurance. Is your house insured?
No. But I am actually now looking at that for the first time.
Okay. Mine is not either, and I'll tell you why. You had a statement that you said that all these statements are true, but in fact the deductible is too high for a typical house that's been built relatively recently or retrofitted, because chances are that you're going to completely lose the whole house are relatively low unless you have a multi-story house or a split level with a solid story garage. If it's an ordinary rancher, your biggest damage is going to be that your chimney may fall through the roof, and you will have a lot of broken dishes, and so your damage is going to be in the order of $25,000 to $30,000. Well, it turns out that a typical deductible, 10% deductible on a dwelling in California, is about $30,000 to $45,000. So you're paying insurance on your deductible, basically, and chances are total loss most likely is going to be due to fire. And the curious thing is that actually fire after the earthquake is covered. Not that I wish it on anybody, but the joke is that after the earthquake if you smell gas because fish. But anyway, so to me, what I see, what you have an opportunity to do, in my view, something has to be done to be able to insure for a given loss. Okay, let's say I want to insure for $50,000. The only way I can do it is go to Lloyd's of London. I cannot do it in California. So anyway,
Okay, so this is a really important question. And I would say what Temblor is trying to do is discover what are the real numbers for this. So we have started to do experiments and studies of that, and let me show you a couple cases. Okay, so here are the CEA offers on a home with a $900,000 rebuild cost. So that's, let's say, a 3,000 square foot home. And we placed that home in Fremont and in Redwood City. And now the CEA, the California Earthquake Authority, the publicly chartered, privately funded source of earthquake insurance in California, there are 30 or so competitors, but that's the state agency, offers deductibles everywhere from 5% up to 25%. But as you go down to a lower deductible, you have a much higher premium. And that's shown here too. But because Temblor knows where you are and something about your house, we can calculate the likelihood of exceeding the deductible in every one of those cases. So this is what we call a net benefit calculation. This is the chance that if you pay premiums to your company for 30 years, what's the chance that all those premiums you paid will come back to you in a benefit? It's the break-even point for insurance. And you can see that what's interesting about this in Fremont is that the numbers are about 17 to 20%. In other words, they're not small. For the Redwood City home, they're considerably smaller. And what you're seeing here is that even though that home in Redwood City is paying or put it the other way, the home in Fremont is paying $2,000 more premiums a month, but because the hazard is so much higher, they're actually getting a huge discount. Their likelihood of a benefit is almost twice that of the home in Redwood City. This means that what we are able to do is exploit weaknesses in the way insurance is priced. And it turns out that they're subsidizing the people on the Hayward Fault. That's what it shows. And therefore, if you're willing to say, I'm not going to worry about a 20% or 1 in 5 chance, then don't get insurance. But if you want to say, I'm going to worry about a 1 in 10 chance or higher, then insurance actually starts to make sense. And that's why I'm saying for myself, my mind is changing on this.
Since you had the numbers there, I think this is important, and many of these people are structural engineers. So if you look at it, typically old house, okay? I just bought an old house, and I get a structural engineer to do a walkthrough and say, let's put in some shear walls, let's fix it up. 15 to 20K. Okay, so if you look at it in Fremont, that's basically 3 years of premiums. We'll pay for a house that is going to have minimal damage in an earthquake. And it's going to be contents damage, which I cannot really easily insure, although there is CEA does offer content damage. So it's that trade-off that also should be somehow counted in. Basically encourage, because one way to do it is encourage people to retrofit houses. Okay, I bought an old junker, I paid a lot of money for it because Bay Area is through the roof. Okay, now I really do want to protect my investment because I'm, to the gills in the payments. Now, if I look at this, now there is a reasonable investment, and so maybe looking at, if it's 20K to upgrade your house to minimize the damage, is it a worthwhile investment?
Okay, so as you saw in the TEMBLOR app, we do attempt to make that calculation for you. And in general, for wood frame homes in California, retrofit always has a net benefit, almost always, unless you look at a very short time span. If you're only going to be in your home for 5 years, you never get to the payback period. And then insurance makes much more sense, interestingly, if you have a short time span than long. But if you have a long time span, and if retrofit adds value to your home, this is another way in which the whole system is broken. I just refinanced my home. The California accredited real estate appraiser came to my house. I said, do you want to know if my house was retrofitted? He said, no. I said, what do you mean, no? He says, it adds no value to the house. Oh, that's crazy. So it should be, Nick, that when you spend that $20,000 to strengthen your house, that's as valuable as spending $20,000 upgrading your bathroom. But we know that that's not really the case. It's just incredible. So that's a problem. And retrofit almost always should be the first line of defense. And you get a discount for retrofitting on insurance, but it's a very modest discount. It doesn't really make sense. So you wanted to ask, Khalid.
I was just wondering if these numbers of the net benefit include anything to do with the fragility of the content, or this is just the structural system?
It's the structural system, yes.
The content is not part of it.
Content is not.
So the picture may be, the numbers may be higher if you include that.
Yes, that's very true.
The content insurance is separate from the structural insurance.
You had a question?
It's mostly been answered. My question was about how you estimate the cost versus benefit from the TEMBLOR app, but I think you answered the majority of that with the additional information provided.
Although this isn't in the app, because for this we need to know actually what your premium is. And our attorney says that if you start to collect that information from people, you are, quote, brokering insurance and you need a license, which is really too bad, because that prevents us from doing anything but the very simple calculation in the app, which doesn't include the fact that you've been paying your insurance company money. We say, okay, you get something back, but you really want to know, hey, is what I got back bigger than what I gave you in the first place? And that's what we're doing here. And we've also had insurance brokers saying, oh, you're just looking at the insurance deal as if it were a return on investment. I don't care about the likelihood of a minor recovery. I want to know what's the chance of in a wipeout, in a catastrophic loss. So we do those calculations too, and it comes out for Redwood City to be about 5% over 30 years. Well, so Nick, the point of this is I had exactly the view you did. I'm not so sure that's correct. And the problem has been that insurance companies have never told us the basis of these prices. They've never told us what our probabilities of a recovery are. No insurance is sold that way. And they're just, insurance is basically sold by scaring you or offering you, quote, peace of mind, whatever that is. And so, I don't know, have you guys seen the CEA commercial?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah, all the time. What are they trying? You know, until I saw that commercial, I didn't, you know, it opens with the entire Earth blowing up. And until I saw that commercial, I didn't realize that the Earth is hard on the outside, but chewy on the inside. So if that's what they're telling you, you know, there's no basis to make a decision. So what we want to do is treat people who might be thinking about buying insurance the exact same way you treat them if they were going to buy a car. What's the mileage? What's the reliability? Now I want to make a good decision. Sure, I only need to go to A to B, and peace of mind means just give me a car, but we don't actually buy that way. What we want to do is help a person say, here are my options. Is there a way to get more out of this?
I have a question. So how do we make the retrofit more visible? Do you have an idea?
Oh,
Like when I had an
Yeah.
alarm installed in my house, the company came and put a big sign in my
yes,
front
that's
yard,
true. We have that too.
Just to scare the thieves that I have something. Should we have a sign that
Yes,
says it?
yes. We need some kind of brass plaque in the doorway. We need something that elevates it and makes it visible. And really, that's the tip of the iceberg. The larger problem with retrofitting is the lack of uniform standards, training, or quality. This is really, really difficult. Every retrofitter spends their time bad-mouthing the other retrofitters, and it's not at all clear what's being done and if what is done is the right thing to do. Do you realize that you cannot color a woman's hair without a license in California, but you can retrofit a home without a license? There's no retrofit accreditation process. So, you know, this is a place where training and true accreditation, so we know what we were doing, would make such a big difference. And a further problem, they tell us, is that the building inspectors for the county, they don't want to get into your crawl space to see if the work was done right. They kind of, there's a hole that they're kind of looking and say, yeah, that's it. Maybe they shine a flashlight. And some retrofitters know they're only going to shine the flashlight to there. They're going to put a fitting right there and they're done. So all of that needs to be enhanced and improved. We need to make it visible. We need to make it high quality. And here's where an institution like yours would be important. We need to test that retrofitted homes actually perform better, and by how much. That would be the strongest thing we can do.
Great.
So thanks for a very interesting talk that brings science and engineering into ultimately the users. So it enables us to understand how decisions may be made beyond the engineering realm. I'm curious to know if this is geared primarily towards wood frame homes. And you've shown the geography of the Bay Area varying quite a bit. What type of wood frame homes are in the cost basis for the initial cost as well as for retrofit? Because you've just identified a whole bunch of variables in retrofit costs.
Yes.
So can you share with us a little bit more about how Temblor handles those variabilities?
It's interesting. We were meeting with Thora Matsison this morning to try to understand, could we do a better job on estimating retrofit cost? You know, unfortunately, it has a lot to do with supply and demand. There's a mandatory ordinance in San Francisco, so there's a much higher demand than supply, so prices are really high, maybe twice as high or more than LA. And what we do is something very simple here. So we use $1,000 plus $2.50 per square foot as a estimate by just showing the numbers that we're getting for different houses to retrofitters and saying, hey, is this in the ballpark? One of the things that we could do is consider whether or not you're on a slope. You know, since we have a digital elevation model underneath this thing, we could say, oh, you're on a slope, let's double the number. Things like that. So we would love to replace this with something more sophisticated.
Can you make these user-defined, or it has to be
Yeah,
coded?
yes, it could be user-defined. Just like, that's a great idea and I had not thought of that. We had put in, we do allow a person to change the cost of building per square foot. You know, obviously a house in Fremont and a house in Atherton have a different build cost per square foot, and we want to be able to reflect that. So we could do this too.
By the way, I was able to follow you on Google Chrome, exactly what you were doing.
Oh, really? That's great.
You said it doesn't work.
Yes, it works on Google Chrome.
Oh,
It does,
okay.
it does, and Safari.
So I have another quote for you. I had a house in Kensington, okay, almost on the wall. It's on a slope.
What was the address?
I'm going to tell you
Boy,
now.
I no longer remember what was the address. 353 Berkeley Park Boulevard.
353,
Berkeley Park Boulevard.
yeah. Okay. Okay, so you're out of the liquefaction zone, that's nice. And according to this, you're out of the landslide zone. So
It's on sandstone, it's pretty good. That one was much better than my current house, which I won't tell you.
that's a state secret.
So embarrassing. No, this is anecdotal structural engineers here again. So I had to do some remodeling, and so I told the contractor to put in a sheet wall, and he put in a sheet wall, and I had a middle of the house wall that was exposed very nicely, and I put in shear paneling and did a really nice job on sheet. So it comes time to sell the house. You talk about, inspectors. So when you sell a house, the real estate agent will, the buyer will get an inspector who comes in and does a walkthrough and identifies all the defects on the house. In this particular case, the individual in question looked at the retrofit and said that the house was now made too stiff and may be more likely to suffer damage.
Oh my God.
Now, how do you make a wood frame house too stiff? I have no idea. When the garbage truck goes by and the whole thing goes like this, But so the problem here is there is also a lot of ignorance out there, regardless of where you go. So we have a lot of education.
Yeah. And I think, regardless of what we feel about insurance, I think we all recognize that for wood frame homes, retrofit makes sense. It's interesting, Volkan is from Istanbul. And in Istanbul, basically all apartment buildings and homes are concrete, reinforced concrete, 4, 5, 6 stories. And so retrofit is very expensive. Insurance is really cheap. The whole thing flips. There's no right answer. It's, you want to know what the options are. And of course, we didn't say it, but one other important thing about insurance is it doesn't provide any safety. Retrofitting is what Nick is doing to protect his family from junk falling on them or securing contents. We would love to have a feature in Temblor that calculated the cost benefit of taking down a chimney. We would love to have a feature that talked about the cost benefit of securing your interior contents, things like that. Because those are small things you can do that could make a big difference.
So I know we talked about this before your talk. So are you thinking Temblor is going to stay for residential homes and then you create another app for something else? Or are you envisioning Temblor growing to include office buildings?
Yeah.
Are you seeing this just getting enlarged as you add things, or you're going to create several of these for different applications?
It's a great question, and Volkan and I have been talking about that ourselves. I think, what do we care about? I care about my home, I care about where I work, I care about where my wife works, I care about my daughter's condo, or apartment in San Francisco, and my mom's place. All of those need to be addressed. So ideally, what the iPhone app and Android app version will allow you to save the locations of the people who matter to you, and will include whether or not appropriate fragilities for apartment buildings and other kinds of structures. So you can kind of keep connected to your family about this, and your job is to make sure everybody is protected in some way. Yes?
So initially you said this is free for personal use. Is it a commercial site?
So we hope there'll be a commercial side so we can afford to continue to do this. We're planning to we would love Temblor to be able to refer people to structural engineers, to refer people to retrofit contractors, to insurance brokers. Because otherwise you're not going to actually do anything if you can't make that connection from realizing you have an issue to hiring a person who's capable of solving that problem. And we'd like to build tools for those people that help them make their case to homeowners. So even though those of us in the room, and most of you are engineers, recognize the value of retrofit, the public doesn't. One question that we've asked everybody is, what's the size of the retrofit market? Nobody knows. How many retrofits are being done in California in a year? Nobody knows. How many homes are in need of retrofit? The California Brace and Bull says 1 million homes. Thor Matheson said 3 million homes. So no matter what the size of the market is, it's a drop in the bucket. California Brace and Bolt has a program where they will give you $3,000, they will give 1,000 people $3,000 toward their retrofit. Okay, so if they're right, and it's 1 million homes in need of this, then they will have solved the problem in 1,000 years. Perfect. So we need to create everything that we can that make those people more effective in reaching clients. And that hopefully will be the way in which we sustain the effort. I hope somebody out there is working on the problem of how we incorporate it into the hazard curves, whether or not you're on a liquefaction or landslide zone. That's something we would really like to be able to do. It should really matter. People who are working on fragility curves, we're really interested in getting better fragility curves for different kinds of structures so we give a more accurate result. And perhaps even more important, validating whatever we have, whatever fragility curves we have or whatever tools we're using, what can we say about their likelihood of being correct? That's something that the public deserves, that we would like to capture, and that I think would be very important for all of us.
One way the fragility can be computed on the fly if we manage to create an app of open seas that can run behind this.
Yeah.
Mahmoud, you create the analysis on an app. It can be done. We can do the analysis on the fly.
You have it on an iPad.
We'll still need to verify it within Worstcase.
Yeah.
Another thing that we think is important that we haven't done is not just talking about the probabilistic hazard, but the hazard in what you might call the worst case scenario. If you're living here next to the Hayward Fault, probably you really only care about the Hayward Fault producing its magnitude 7+ earthquake. And we should be calculating what's your damage under that scenario. And in our work with company clients, what we've learned is they want both. They want to know what the probabilistic result is, and they want to know the worst case scenario. And that's something that we think would be really helpful. It may not ever happen, but it's real. Nick?
In terms of data, have you thought about looking at both Loma Prieta and Northridge, where you actually know specific houses that were damaged and maybe able to find the insurance information and the degree of damage? Northridge, we know Santa Monica Bluffs, for example, all of the houses were damaged. That might be a way to kind of
Yes.
see how well these general fragility curves really match with what actually happened.
Yeah, Volkan, do you know has this W1 fragility curve that we're using, is it should be based on Northridge and Loma Prieta results, because it was built after that time. And then there's the Caltech Curie set of incomplete fragility curves, which might better capture that process. Hopefully NAPA will give enough data for an analysis, and Christchurch too. So we're very eager to have those validations so that we know how strong these results are. So I really appreciate your comments, and I'll put my email address up here. If you have any other thoughts, if you would like to contribute in any way, of course, contact us. Thank you.
Please join me one more